UNHCR for a long time, but also you've seen many different refugees, probably different nationalities at least. So during this period, he interviewed thousands of individuals for refugee status determination purposes and conducted in-depth research and analysis on country of origin information on Iraq, Iran, and Afghanistan. And of course, before Syria, these were the main nationalities of asylum seekers and asylum seekers in Turkey. So Mr. Atlı started working on peaceful coexistence and social cohesion of refugees in 1916 after serious incidents refugees face in different locations in Turkey. Probably you're referring to a Syrian case here because has the very high number of Syrians under temporary protection. So since the beginning of 2019, he is assigned as the field officer and head of Ankara Field Unit, which is covering 50 provinces in Turkey, for the purpose of supporting existing structures to protect refugees, assisting formation of new structures to facilitate the access of refugees to basic rights and services, and support social cohesion efforts of at all levels. Like, you know, this can be at the governmental level, but at the society, by the civil society, and at the local governments level as well. So with a specific focus to municipalities and religious leaders and muhtars, local administrations, NGOs, refugee representing groups and societies and universities, Ankara Field Unit is working in partnership with government institutions such as, of course, the Provincial Directorate of Migration Management, Provincial Directorate of Family, Labor and Social Services, and of course the Directorate or the Provincial Directorate of Education, Social Assistance and Solidarity Foundations, among many others. So throughout his experience in this humanitarian area, Mr. Atlı has been involved in formation and activation of different civil society institutions for the support and protection of vulnerable groups of persons in Turkey. So that's a lot of work actually in your platter, Mr. Atlı, and we are very eager to learn what has been happened in the past, let's say in the recent past, perhaps since you joined the UNHCR since 1991. And that was an important year, by the way. And of course, until today, and what are the differences? What are the different attitudes of Turkish people towards asylum seekers and refugees recently? So the floor is yours, or the screen is yours. Again, welcome.
Thank you very much, very dear. Host disabled me to screen sharing, Şebnem Hanım.
I'll do that.
All right.
Maybe you can start.
Okay, let me start. Actually, this very dear participants. I hope I'm not going to be boring, because as an old man who spent around 30 years with UNHCR only, my experiences and knowledge might be a bit old. However, without knowing what was before, understanding today is impossible. At least this is my life experience. But still, I'm not going to bore you with my experiences in here or there, but I would rather look into the developments happening. However, let's start with what we are dealing with. That is a group of foreigners who do not have their government protection, and they ended up in Turkey. And it is valid not only for Turkey, almost every country in the world receives this kind of persons asking protection, seeking refuge, if we would call it with the UN or refugee jargon. This is nothing new. I was reading Gumiliev. He has a book on the Khans of East. There he reports very smoothly around, I believe in the 2nd and 3rd century before Jesus, the wars between the Han clans and the Chinese army would end with some of those who were caught or sought asylum on the other side. They were allowed to live for a while. And then in the first peace agreement, generally, they were the ones asked back, and they were executed on the border to make it an example to the rest. That is nothing new, and it has never really ended. However, the modern world did not really so much of mass movements because populations did not have enough facilities, or the settlements were very little. When you really look at a map, you see huge countries, but only 2%, 3% of the land is occupied with housing. Normally, it is like that because the rest of territory is either a mountain or a desert, agricultural land whatsoever. So people would prefer living close to the water rather than the border. That's why crossing was an issue. Anyway, the 1951 was a date for asylum procedures and the law on asylum. After the Second World War, the world decided to sort this refugee problem because Europe was occupied by Germans, and then everyone had to change places. There was too many of the same shape. Like when the Soviet Union collapsed, there were more efforts on elimination of statelessness because the citizens of Soviet Union ending up in very different countries, and they had very serious difficulties of finding a government to protect them. So, looking into refugee matter, Europe thought they can sort this issue very smoothly, and because it was overall it was Europe, and then the importance of North Africa or what happened in a war against this or that was not really much of a consideration, and the new world system would focus to sort the main problem in Europe. The definition of refugee was put in the Convention 1951 Geneva Convention on the Status of Refugees in the first article, paragraph A, as those who had to leave their country, means the first condition you have to be out of your country, because of the incidents happening before 1951 in Europe, which is very, very limiting as space and time, and they were persecuted or at risk of persecution due to their race, religion, nationality, membership to a particular social group, and holding a political opinion. And for the same reasons, they are not willing or unable to receive protection from their country of nationality. So when you look at this, so whoever had suffered from the previous governments, Germans, German collaborators, or whatsoever, actually after the Second World War, those who were collaborated with Germans were also persecuted in Europe. It happens the same way everywhere throughout the history. They came back to a point where they understood this description is not enough, because there were refugees who did not really, it was not happening only in Europe. In 1967, international community wanted to expand this definition, and they opened the protocol to expand 51 Convention to a level where governments could choose. They could have stick themselves to the previous description, or they could say before 1951 and after 1951 in Europe. They could say before and after 1951 in Europe and elsewhere, everywhere. Turkey preferred to have this option and decided to process asylum procedures for refugee status only for those coming from Europe. In a discussion in UNHCR, I think in 1994 or 5, I'm not sure, around that date, we had to call Ministry of Foreign Affairs asking them what Turkish government considers as Europe. The answer was very clear. They said countries which were member to European Security and Cooperation Agency. And there, looking at this, including Azerbaijan Republic, Georgia, Russia, from there to north and west was Europe, starting from and Armenia, starting from Iran to south and east was non-Europe for Turkey. So that made a bit of an understanding in Turkey and what was happening to the others who were coming to Turkey. In 1961, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sayın Alparslan Türkeş, signed a letter allowing UNHCR to work in Turkey. So UNHCR's main task to ensure that national procedures are within the international standards and refugees receive adequate protection. That's a monitoring authority given by the international community. And at the same time, in places in lack of processes, UNHCR process cases for asylum application and collaborates with the host country and international community to find a durable solution for the refugees. This is how it starts in Turkey.
Okay, just Miss, thank you. You can actually, I think from now on, you can share your screen with us if you prefer.
I do.
Make you a co-host. Thank you.
Voila. Just 1 second, I'm trying to find one very
under share screen,
I'm trying to find that.
Double click actually.
Very strangely, I cannot find my document.
Alternatif olarak Gamze Hanım'la paylaşırsanız o paylaşır ekranını. Siz de ilerlersiniz o şekilde.
Bence daha makul. O zaman şöyle yapayım. Elif orada mısın? Gamze Hanım'ın e-mail adresi nedir arkadaşlar?
Siz bana atın isterseniz ben Gamze Hanım'a forwardlayayım ya da ben paylaşayım. Benim e-mailim sizde olacak değil mi Akif Bey?
gamze.ertor@aspi.edin.tr.
Bir saniye. Gamze.ertos
@aspi.edin.tr.
Gönderdim. Çok tuhaf bir şekilde beceremedim. İşte yaşlı olmanın getirdiği bir şey olmalı bu.
Estağfurullah, öyle demeyin.
Gerçekten. Efendime söyleyeyim. Evet. Aha.
Okay.
Buldum.
Tamam.
Dediğim gibi ihtiyar olmak çok zor.
Estağfurullah, öyle demeyin. Bakın ne güzel oldu.
Voilà. Şimdi, ekran paylaşımı gerçekleşti mi Şebnem Hocam?
Gerçekleşti. Çok teşekkürler.
Ben teşekkür ederim. Okay. So, what happens is this. In a national procedure, everybody would have national protection. Citizens get this protection from their own country. And those who cannot get protection from their own country will get international protection. So, frankly, I start with this because I really have to make myself clear. That is for my path. And international society created all these instruments for the protection of individuals. And countries who are enacting these institutions, these documents into their law, which is converting this international documents as an integral part of national law, uses them. And there, everyone, including non-citizens, enjoy the same rights. Considering when you look at the names of these institutions, we will share this with all participants. Not really get into details of each. So each of that is protecting a right of each individual. And looking into that, Turkey, in addition to the international instruments put into its own law, added national law. And the latest one is the law on foreigners and international protection, is the key instrument which is designing how those who are receiving international protection, and also the regulation on temporary protection is also applying to others, because there is a very slight difference between them. And also other laws are protecting everybody. From child protection law to municipality law, there are elements which are giving opportunities for refugee protection. And you would see these names and they may look strange to you. Why should civil administration or Turkish Coast Guard Command have anything to do with refugee protection? There, if an individual comes across to the area of responsibility of any department, it is a responsibility for that department, and not enough, coming to a point where each citizen, from shopkeeper to university professors, we have our humanitarian responsibilities for protection of others. And that is happening in Turkey. I can proudly say it is in a very large scale, very, very effective, and we are very proud of being in Turkey, working with this kind of host community, which is literally making our life incomparably easy. To start with the definition, since I already made that, I am skipping this part. When you look at this difference are very clear. 67 protocol expanded the coverage of 51 convention. It was optional. You would hear that I made hundreds of presentations in my professional life. Everywhere we said Turkey implements 51 convention with a geographical limitation, as if Turkey put a reservation into that. It's not correct. I am correcting my own self. I'm correcting what we have been preaching the last 60 years, most probably. Turkey chose one option, which is geographically limiting the refugee protection as an option given by the international community and international law. Therefore, UNHCR never said it, and nobody in the world could say Turkey is limiting that, using only one part. But again, when you look at the description, of course, it's somehow limited. With this map, you would see parties to 51 Convention and 67 Protocol, and non-members that were extremely limited. And the signing ceremony photograph is just a memory. They are not as old as I am, but frankly speaking, looking into today's structure and that day's structure, international community did not change much. That is rather trying to solve this matter on diplomatic grounds, which has its own realities in international politics. However, on the ground, everything is different. That's why every citizen, every muhtar, every imam is a part of refugee protection, because reality is numbers are far beyond of what was perceived in 1951. So, going back again, when you look at the law and the definitions there, we are looking into refugees or individuals who are fitting in refugee definition, but they are coming into borders in huge masses. They are taken into temporary protection consideration. This doesn't mean that their status is temporary, valid for a week or a month or a year. This is a procedure where government temporarily decides that all of them deserve protection. The UNHCR jargon, or International Society, used to use a Latin word, prima facie, for this kind of an expression, because there you would know majority of those who are arriving would receive refugee status, and I could say even more, almost all of them are fearing some kind of persecution. On this sense, this temporary protection of prima facie status given on the individual, as soon as you identify if the person is coming from a country or a minority or a region that is at risk, and that is standard there. International protection requests cannot be taken under individual assessment is the key point, because numbers are mass. And there, international protection matter, that is rather an individual procedure, and everybody would really come to the point of the same explanation in this Article 61 of the Law and Foreigners. We're talking about events occurring in Europe, and there is no time limit in that. Still, looking into this, completion refugee status can be given. That is deciding who is a refugee. It is in our law too. That is clearly mentioned. And then, what status Turkey gives to the others? If the one who is fearing persecution on one of the 5 grounds can receive refugee status. This doesn't mean that everybody gets refugee status. Some of them get refugee status, some of them are not, because there is a procedure, and procedure aims to distinguish who qualifies, who does not qualify. Those who are not coming from Europe, they receive conditional refugee status, and this status is kept until United Nations finds a durable solution for this person. Therefore, Turkey commits herself not to deport these people. Actually, if they are refugees, the term, again, international jargon is refoulement, which means returning the person to the country of nationality if the person is stateless to the previous country of residence. There, Turkey commits herself to non-refoulement principle for those who qualify to this definition given in this Article 62, paragraph 1, until there is a durable solution. And this durable solution can be resettlement to a third country, could be a European country, could be a North American country, could be a South American country, could be repatriation, voluntary repatriation back to the country of origin or previous country of residence, or could be naturalization in the country of asylum. And the example of that is very simple. You see, Syrians came, they sought asylum, they found refuge in Turkey, and in time, Turkish government decided to naturalize them, and immediately at the moment they get naturalization of a country, this definition of refugee or conditional refugee drops automatically. You cannot keep a third country nationality and refugee status at the same time. So, resettlement to a third country, I'm sure some of you have heard, UNHCR facilitates resettlement of refugees from Turkey to other countries in the probably last 45 years. The numbers were very limited. When I first started, it was like 5,000, then it dropped to 1,000, 1,500, 1,200 per year. Now in these years, we're talking about 30,000 persons to be resettled to other countries. However, when we were resettling 1,000 persons, we were having 1,000, 1,500 arrivals a year. Now we have a much larger population. Subsidiary protection is something that you may give to a foreigner if this person may really fear certain types of persecution, which is already expressed in the law, and they do not qualify for refugee status. For example, you might have someone who committed a serious non-political crime, and therefore before entering the country of origin, or the country of asylum. However, in case of a return, one of those 3 matters may apply. When you look at this Article 63, B section of subarticle 1 says torture, inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment. When you look at this, for example, if persons gonna be lashed in public, since UN Committee on Human Rights decided this is a degrading punishment, a person may not be returned to the country of nationality. So this is again a procedure under the patronage and implementation of the government everywhere. We are only following the matter. Those who are under subsidiary protection, which means they sought asylum, their asylum application is rejected, however, subsidiary protection given, that is really a recommendation UNHCR follows. So in summary, we're looking into a group of people who may be in individual numbers or group numbers. So if we are going to do a citizenship determination like international protection application or a recognition of refugee status, it is individual determination. Therefore, they have to apply individually, and the procedure should end individually for their cases. But if it comes to a group determination, like it happened in the previous years, I will give examples of that, or in the Syrian situation, you may just clear the matter with temporary protection as a whole. So this I'm going to skip very fast because it is literally the procedure. We put this into this presentation just to really have an idea. What kind of an idea? So what is happening, all these people, and how it is happening, you just have an opinion on this. In every application, you might do it individually. You do it for international protection or for temporary protection. But decisions for international protection must come individually. In the temporary protection, it comes as a group. So passing that, and we're talking about this refugee protection throughout, and that's my main job. Actually, my main job, not only mine, everybody working for UNHCR does that, must do that. Even our accounting person is supporting an activity which is protecting refugee. And we have been discussing this for a very long time. What is refugee protection? That is access to fundamental human rights. When we say fundamental, we're very clear that is unrestrictable. And this unrestrictable rights are generally highly respected in Turkey, and therefore we're proudly explaining this everywhere we're going. So when we explain this procedure, nobody feels any difficulty with that. These are the fundamental rights of the refugee in Turkey. Non-refoulement, we put this in Turkish too, not to create any misunderstanding in the matter. This is forbidding government to return someone to a place. I say a place, I mean either country of nationality or, if stateless, previous country of residence in case of a possible persecution. And the person should be given life with dignity. Therefore, you may allow the persons and you may force them for undignified jobs like prostitution, like slavery. You cannot be insulting them. You have to respect their practice of their religion, that kind of stuff. Registration and documentation. And there I put specifically education, health, access to social assistance. These should be registered as basic. In fact, international law gives education as an unlimitable right only for the basic education. Countries can give more education within their capacity. Therefore, even citizens don't have the unlimited right as a basic right to go to university. Therefore, we're not asking this for refugees either. I didn't mention this basic here because in Turkey, access to education, health, and social assistances is not limited with the basic one. Therefore, that's a proud part of Turkish asylum procedures and Turkish nations. When I say Turkish nations, I mean the nation of Turkey giving this kind of rights with a large group to refugees as well. So looking at what these rights, are they creating responsibilities for refugees? Again, responsibilities are also not very extensive. This is very basic, and since Turkey regulated this differently from majority of the countries in the world, it has been an example. Generally, refugees are put into camps and they are restricted to stay in these camps until their procedure is over. Like in Australia, they put them in an island for a long while, many measures. In Turkey, refugees are requested, or I would say, ikamete mecbur olmak. They are put into a residence in a province. So they are living in Kastamonu. They are free to move in Kastamonu. They don't need a permit to move from house to a shop, from work back to house. However, to travel between one province to the other, they have to take a permission. So none of these obligations are refugees not willing to do. And then the last one, enjoying rights as per mentioned in legislation. So we are expecting refugees to respect the national laws without an exception. My culture is different. The country of my nationality is different, and implementations were different in my country, are not discussions happening around. I'm going back to the previous one. Here, I don't think anybody would really request one of these rights not to exist. For example, there is employment. Looking into that, in place of feeding refugees without their efforts into their own lives, in place of making them a burden, both Turkish law and international law supports them given an opportunity within the explained rights to work. This way, the regulation makes it extremely effective. I would like to say, in the name of international community and me in person, we have to thank Turkey for its hospitality and humanitarian treatment to refugees. You see, there's these numbers, although these are a bit old, looking into that 3.5 million refugees, it is mainly Syrian refugee number is reaching to that number now, is far beyond any other refugee registration procedure. These are all registered ones. There are non-registered ones that makes the number far beyond than this. And we have refugees around 5 million. This is my personal estimation. And from 79 countries, people requested asylum. So you see names here from Saudi Arabia to United Arab Emirates, from Burkina Faso to Egypt, from Yemen to Bahrain, everybody. You have people from even Comoro Islands. And not enough into that, the number of people are more than a country population. In the world, there are 115 countries which do not have 5 million population. Not enough. They have parliaments, they have president, they have a cabinet, they have ministries, services, infrastructure, and all whatsoever. A country like Mongolia, the land is vast. So considering that, Turkey is hosting more than a country, I would say. And this is not the first time Turkey receives refugees or Anatolia receives a mass population movement. When we used to listen to history at the secondary school whatsoever, and Turks got onto their horses and moved towards west, conquered this, moved whatsoever, and conquered everywhere all the way to Poland. But then again, that's a population movement which took time and happened in time. However, to make it more reasonably understandable within the modern state structures and modern structure of the world, Turkey lived very serious population movements, and some of you, or rare of you, would remember. I remember this Bulgarian and Iranian crisis. However, some of you would remember the Iraqi crisis better, I believe. Turkey experienced mass movements in very short times. If people from Bulgaria came within a few weeks, and number was huge. And the crisis was needed the involvement of the prime minister even at that time. Iranian revolution pushed more than 1 million, but it took, I believe, a few years for them to come and to go. And Iraqi crisis in '88 after the Halabja massacre was very important because it was a mass murder of civilians with chemical weapons. And in 1991, the crisis in Iraq was ended with a Security Council decision dated 5th of April 1991. But none of these lasted more than a few months. When I started in May 1991, some of refugee population had already returned, and the crisis had started only in February. And then looking before the end of summer, 1991, vast majority were already home. And in '88 crisis, 500,000 people came. 3 years later, when I started in Silopi, which we were covering Mardin Kızıltepe too, there was one refugee camp with, I believe, a few hundred persons, the leftovers of '88 crisis. But this time, we had 3.5 million only from Syria and more from Afghanistan, a number from Iraq. And this is, especially the Syrian crisis, is the longest migration refugee crisis in the last probably 100 years for Turkey. And there, Turkey was not really very ready for that. You would see this camp, construction was very fast. There were 22 like this. Refugees were hosted well, they are treated very well, and they really felt safe. I've been one of these camps, not this UNCHR, but I was the one in Marash. I said, I am from Diyarbakir, the villages, certain villages of Diyarbakir or Shirnak is settled here, they wouldn't go back home ever. It was very well established because the expectation was they are not going to stay very long because they are under temporary protection. It's going to be temporary. Looking into this matter, refugees came, refugees stayed, and they had very serious difficulties, especially in communication, harmony, and there was a very serious infrastructure matter. Refugees did not know Turkish, they couldn't read Latin alphabet, and Turks did not know Arabic, we couldn't read Arabic alphabet. Learning Turkish by them or learning Arabic by us did not really happen. And this communication difficulty ended up, neighbors don't understand each other, and difficulties of teachers at school teaching children whatsoever, because we don't learn everything at home. We learn many things at home, but many things at school. Since communication didn't happen and communities did not know each other, Turks didn't know the customs of refugees, and refugees didn't know the customs of Turkey. And that ended up with a very serious difficulty that they did not really treat each other well. They didn't understand that refugee in Konya didn't know. Konya people do not like to have any noise after 10:30. In Switzerland, I learned that when my daughter was born, she was only a few days old, and she's screaming extremely, a baby. Neighbors would open the windows and would scold at us because Geneva was not very happy of any kind of noise. Looking into this matter, language barriers, the expectancy of very short crisis really did not allow anything to be made properly. The expectancy of short was to the level that Prime Minister Mr. Davutoğlu gave a declaration. It was on the press. He was saying that in 2 months we'll be praying at the Emeviyyet Mosque in Damascus. Didn't happen. Didn't happen. And when the Prime Minister says it's going to last this short, nobody would do anything for either integration or adaptation or teaching whatsoever. Therefore, this language barrier and lack of acquaintances, that it created very serious learning difficulties. And then people had to interpret what they have seen. Like I was talking to Syrian teachers in Konya, And before them, I had talked to imams and muhtars, and I talked to local press. There were incidents in Konya against refugees. And we explained them, these things are not welcome by the society. Teacher said, if anybody had told us, we would have warned our community, things wouldn't have been this way. And frankly speaking, only talking to a number of Syrian teachers decreased the tension in Konya more than 90%. So that it is what happened to me. I explained it all in my almost every discussion. I went to Moscow to take part in the training of Russian asylum judges. High judges, it's a well-established country. I am well-educated. I trust myself. I am going there to train judges. So good, very good training. They told me seeing Moscow metro is almost obligatory because Moscow metro is almost a museum. I strongly recommend everyone. Anybody going to Moscow must see at least one station in metro. Marvelous. All the Soviet infrastructure, the walls are a piece of art. And I'm going to go to the Azerbaijani market where I find local stuff. I went down into the metro. There, I'm looking around. I cannot find my way because everything is written in Kirill alphabet. People around don't speak any English. I don't speak a word of Russian. I couldn't find the way. So I looked at what is written and I directed myself to that way. Going, and in less than a few minutes, a group came and then rushing out. They kicked me around and pulling me, pushing me, and somebody held from my arm and pushed me out. Says, "What are you doing?" So I'm trying to reach metro to go to Azerbaijani square. He says, "But this is not the way to go in. This is the way out." He showed me the way in. I found the way that way. There I learned. You can't read. You can't talk. There is only one thing left to find a way. You interpret the way you are designed. Whatever I did in my country, I did there too. And Syrians and Iraqis and Afghans, they are really pushed to do that way. And considering my personal observation and seeing what refugees are doing, what people are disturbed of refugee are mainly because of that. We did not train them. There were problems of communication and then harmony and of course infrastructure. I am trying to explain. You would see from sleeping hour to working hours and how to really use a park became an issue. In Urfa, I was talking to Deputy Secretary General Municipality. I said, "What can we give you?" He said, "Well, don't give me anything, just get it out of my sight." They have 350,000 refugees residing in Urfa. He says, "If you can give me a vacuum cleaner, which there are, only to clean the shells of seeds in the park, that would help." I said, "What is the problem?" Urfa goes to 50 degrees in shadow in summer. Everybody goes out to parks, and Syrians have the habit of eating this seeds and throwing shells of it on the ground. We can't clean that anymore. It says it went beyond capacity of municipality. The weight was that high. I smiled. How come a greater city municipality of Urfa cannot clean that? And I saw in a park my own self. It's uncleanable, and you see every park is in that shape. It's not only the refugees eating this seeds. Citizens were eating that too. However, the infrastructure was designed accordingly. Everything was cleanable. Looking into that kind of an issue, from schools to hospitals, from public transportation, bus, dolmuş, whatsoever, to clean water supply and wastewater treatment became a difficulty. We received a whole country without investing in our own infrastructure. Where is a clean water is a difficulty. There, I was in Kilis. The request of imams and muhtars were, they said refugees should be trained on how to use clean water. Population of Kilis is 90,000 persons. Population of refugees in Kilis was 110,000. So even if nobody would waste water, this water facility was not going to be enough for all this population. We had very serious difficulty of information. Refugees were not informed of their rights and or their obligations. Then a number of them stayed unregistered, refugees switching places for every purpose, finding a job or too crowded, or refugee or relatives living in another place. This irregularity created a very serious number of refugees who are not registered in the province where they were assigned to. And there, refugees did not know where to ask, where to resort their assistance of rights. And since they don't know, they were just mingling around and they were trying to reach anything. Those who opened shops or made investments, they started putting Arabic signs because their expected customers were going to be Syrians. And that created a very serious reaction from the citizens of the country. And again, it was not only for refugees. Citizens didn't know what to expect from refugee. What is the right of this person? Because everybody says, our guests, our temporary protection persons, and this favors we are dealing with them. Allah razı olsun. Everybody relays the matter to Allah and Allah's sake, which is fine. But looking into that, refugees thought we're making a favor to Syrians. No, it's not a favor. The rights are written in the law. In this kind of a situation, there is nothing else to be done. And then citizens did not know what is expected from a refugee. They started making it up. Like I made up my way in a metro in Moscow. Citizens said they should not be sleeping in this hour, but they should be sleeping in the hour I am sleeping. That is a very serious matter. How are we going to sort that? As I said before, when the Prime Minister says 2 months, you cannot stand up and make an action which may contradict with the Prime Minister. If we would really train refugees, if we would have started to explain what is expected from them, it was gonna, people would say, are they gonna stay longer than 2 months? Therefore, all these difficulties left this lack of information and people, not only refugees, but also citizens in a very, very difficult situation. Of course, with all that, we had a lot of positive developments too. Labor costs decreased extremely to a level where certain industries, which were almost dying, came back. From shoemaking to construction, from leather treatment to textile, especially in agriculture and livestock, refugees contributed extremely because the labor cost dropped around 70%. Therefore, their contribution to economy was very high and very positive. I could say Turkey went through a very difficult economic situation. Production did not drop. Because of this, the labor cost dropped 70% if refugees were working. And their criminal rate was very low, 1.3%. This is the rate Minister of Interior declared. And then the ministry declared another number. If you're excluding the crimes committed among themselves, refugees' criminal rate is 0.8%, which is 5 in 1,000. However, when you look at the citizens in Turkey, the criminality rate is 4.5%. So when you really consider all these developments, it was not really that awful. However, there are certain matters. Unregistered refugee was a concern. And then it is, of course, coming to the attention of Muhtar. Muhtar is in the district. People see many people coming, many people going. This irregular movement, it created a bit of a concern. And in two communities faced very serious difficulties in the social understanding, social cohesion of each other. Polygamy was finished in Turkey by law. High rate of birth in Turkey, it was never an issue. Even president requested 3 children, asking for that because probably they see a difficulty in the matter. Forced marriage of young girls, it was almost eliminated because schooling is going high, and the bourgeois, the town people, when you're moving from agriculture to urban, this marriage age goes very high. And then difficulties in schooling of refugees, their kids, even kids couldn't know each other. Some of the refugees received repeated assistance, and some of them did not receive any. Some of them had to sell some of this assistance materials. I am a witness to that too. I did ask the refugee community, how come refugees are selling this? They said, because we can't pay the electricity bill. They are giving us a food pack, but they don't pay the electricity bill. Therefore, what are we going to do? Well, they have a point. Is this the right thing to sell assistance material? No, not necessarily. But are we expecting them to pay their electricity and water bills? I suppose we do. So they are finding their own way. This rapid increase in child labor, economic difficulty forced the community to send their children, whoever could work, to work. And that was highly abused. A kid of 13, 14-year-old was working 30 days a month, more than 12 hours a day, and he was getting 400 lira last year. And it is really painful. The schooling was very low. In the high school, lycée, the rate of enrollment was around, I think, 18%. Decrease of labor wages created serious problems in certain provinces or for certain communities. And rumors around refugees that they are given a house, they are given a salary, their shops are not taxed whatsoever, created a very serious anger with the community. Sudden and high increase in rents in provinces where refugees were very crowded created a very serious reaction. In Konya, a specific group, an outcast, Abdals, were living in a district, refugees arrived, they were paying 80 lira a month a rent to something which you couldn't call a house, but some kind of a shelter. The rent of that shelter went to 800 after refugees received. The local populace was almost burning them, and they did. There were attacks in 2016. They burned, I think, 22 shops in Ankara and 26 shops belonging to refugees in Konya. There were some of them had to beg, and actually this beggary was a bit abused because local beggars were also using the name of Syrian. It created a very serious reaction. And the negative use of language by media was a very, very important push factor against refugees. They used this because they didn't know. And this, what is not read, what is not painful is not going to be read, and press or media used a very, very negative language. All these also created very serious difficulties in that. But still, in the end of all that, UNHCR is thankful to Turkish community for the great hospitality and humanitarian attitude shown by them. I would say even in the poorest districts, when refugees arrived, the neighbors sent them household, food, they cared them, assistance from charity was distributed indiscriminately, and for years from 2011, it's in huge numbers, but I am also monitoring the eastern borders. Afghan movement is really rapid, coming and large. So refugees did not receive inhuman treatment in Turkey. When we compare this really many countries in the world, the treatment refugees receive is something international community and UNHCR highly appreciates. I am very thankful to every citizen of this country, every authority of this country deeply to convert this matter into rather an enjoyable, appreciable manner than turning it into a disaster. This attention of universities, I highly appreciate. I am very thankful to this university as well as others. Because of the leading role of university, we can explain ourselves to society much better. I would rather cut here, my dear professor. I am ready for any questions. These are our websites. So if students are interested, they can check any kind of information available on the sites. And through you, we are open to every kind of discussion or information sharing. Thank you very much.